Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is costume designer Clare Henkel. Based in Boulder, Colorado, Clare has designed for notable directors, actors, and musicians around the country, including Indianapolis, where she has been a costume designer of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra's Yuletide celebration, of which this year is her 24th and last. Join me now as I go on the aisle in a conversation with Clare. Hello, Clare Henkel.
Hi, Tom.
Took some time, but here we are. I'm so happy to have you on my podcast. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
In the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, you are a costume designer. And in particular, you're the costume designer for Yuletide, the annual Christmas celebration production that has been held at the Hilbert Circle Theater. Have you been there for the whole time? How old is this event? You've been there 24 years.
You know, I should know that. This will be my 24th year of designing the costumes for Yuletide. My sister Ellen, who you probably know, was designing it prior to me. It was much smaller, and they wanted to amp things up. And I have been a costume designer my entire career. So they hired me 24 years ago. And as you said, this will be my last one, but I've been here for 24 years.
Are you retiring from the business period or just this project?
I am fully retired from all the rest of my design work as of October. That was a choice I made. I was just ready to stop and do some other artwork and things like that. But I agreed to do the costumes for Yuletide this year, and then that's my final year.
So you're not one for benchmarks, so you didn't feel like you need to stick around for the 25th.
Well, Ty Johnson, the executive producer, would like me to have stayed around, but I'm just ready, and I wanted to be able to stop on my terms when I was ready.
So you mentioned other art. What else do you're creative in general, huh?
Well, there are things like my family was very musical, is very musical. And right before the pandemic, I was given a ukulele, and I've picked that up and play that. And I play weekly with a bunch of guys and sing. And also, I want to do some other artwork, including encaustic. If you know what that is, it's a cool wax treatment. And also, I would like to make some costumes, some clothing items that nobody can wear. Like, so no actors are saying, I can't sword fight or dance or lift my arms. I want to make them out of metal or wood or...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Okay. And who will you do that for?
Just for me.
Okay. So you're not going to start another business?
No, I have no interest in doing that. I've never been a big stitcher, really, but I like to sew for my granddaughter and just, a few other things.
Oh, how old is your granddaughter?
She is 3.5.
Oh, and
her name is Nola.
How lucky is she to have a grandma who sews for her?
Well, she's a lucky girl anyway. You have seen technically my stepdaughter, Emily Van Fleet, in Yuletide and in other pop shows there. And she and her husband, Nate, had a child 3.5 years ago. So.
Oh, wow.
Great.
So you and I were talking before we started recording that, I know your family because Ellen in particular and your brother Dan, who you said passed. When did he pass?
2 years ago, April.
Okay. And your father,
yes.
He was an actor, wasn't he?
He was. He was very active in community theater, civic. He worked at civic for a while, but mostly at civic, but a few other things too. CTS which I think is
Yeah.
still around, right?
That's where I would know him because at one time, briefly, I was managing director before they closed, right at the time they
Oh,
closed. And then we
yeah.
moved to University of Indianapolis, but maybe we worked together on a production. Go
He
ahead.
played Kris Kringle in Miracle on 34th Street, and he played Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, and some really cool roles. And I remember playing the piano so he could work on the songs and accompanying.
And your brother Dan, he was a guitarist and a singer. Was he a
Yeah,
songwriter?
not
What?
as much a singer. He was a guitarist, mostly classical. He spent his career doing PR, put the guitar on hold until after his kids were all grown
Right.
and everything. And he was quite an accomplished guitarist and such a wonderful man, and he is greatly missed.
And your sister Ellen, of course, singer, actor, director, producer, concierge for the
Yep,
Palladium.
yep.
I've interviewed her several times and can't wait to read that book. I mean,
Yeah,
all the stories. And,
she needs to. She is a force of nature, that
I
girl.
was going to use that to describe
She
being
is.
kind. Yeah, she's remarkable. Costumer, right?
Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
forgotten that and she has a voiceover studio,
She
and she's
does.
like a famous voiceover actor.
Yes. Yes. She's so good at that. She has the voice that I don't have,
And
which
is
is
she
one of,
still working as a voiceover?
yes, she still does that. It's easy for her to do, and she has the equipment at home, so she can
She
do that easy.
probably now those voiceover people can get work all over the world because they're in their studios and they
Yep.
phone calls. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
true. It's true.
So how about the rest of your family? Who else is surviving?
I have well, he's my little brother, John,
Mhm.
who lives in Northern California. We were very close. We always have been, but when I lived in California, we were very close. And
Okay.
he's always been in technology of sorts, AV things in high school and all that, and then has worked for some very high-tech companies, audio and visual, doing things. We have a sister, Amy, in New Mexico, who has lived there for years. So we've kind of been all over the country.
Do you ever gather reunions?
We do. When my parents passed away, well, my oldest brother passed away first, and the other six of us said, we really need to gather together. So we've been doing that at least once a year
Oh, that's
somewhere in the
great.
country. The
Yeah.
group is just smaller, which is just the way it is.
Yeah. And tell me about your mother.
She was amazing. She was never on stage like me. She was more backstage and was never very theatrical, really, but she would do props and she was a big support. And she took all of us to all of our dance classes and all of the things to support us all. And they had a unique way of encouraging all of us in the direction we were interested.
Did you all train at the Civic Junior Theater program?
I don't know that we did. I remember taking dance classes from Lynette Schisla,
Oh my gosh.
but
Yeah,
I moved away from Indianapolis
yeah,
when I was 18.
I was gonna get to that. So
Yeah.
tell me about your background. Where did you go to high school
I went
before?
to North Central.
Okay. Oh,
I
yeah.
was active in the theater program and in counterpoints and all those things.
Hmm.
And then I went to the University of Evansville for college.
Oh my gosh, is that where you
Yep,
earned your wings in theater? I mean, their
yep,
theater
yep.
program is one of the best.
It is. I was in the first BFA class because I graduated in 1980. So it
Okay.
was a few years ago. And then I started out acting, but I'm just way too self-conscious. And I always worked in the costume shop. I always liked to draw, put things together. And I realized really not until my senior year that's what I was meant to
You
do.
also learned how to sew early on.
Yes, yes, which I've never loved that much, but I have people who have done that for me all these
And did
years
you learn how
who
to
are
make
much better.
patterns early on too?
I did some,
Yeah.
but I really was designing. And
Okay.
so I've always relied on the amazing talents.
Okay.
Uh,
So you never built, you weren't a seamstress.
I mean, I did at first. You have to do your own shows. And then,
Yeah.
I would pop in to help with crafts and things like this. But all
Okay.
the shops I work in are much better than I am at all of them.
When did you know that you wanted to be a costume designer?
Probably my senior year in college. I had a great mentor at Evansville, Joe Flauto, who let me assist him on a set. And then my senior year, I started designing costumes.
Okay. And
Yeah.
who were your inspirations in the costume design world?
You know, they're all the great people that everybody says, like Edith Head and things like that. Later on, I'm skipping some years, but I assisted Robert Morgan and Robert Blackman, who are both two wonderful designers. Robert Blackman went on to do a lot of Star Trek things. And Robert Morgan has been based in Vermont for years and has done Broadway and a lot of regional theater where I worked, like the Old Globe and a lot of other places. So,
Mhm.
I think when I started out, it was more the entire world of design, not
Movie,
just costume design.
television, play, musical. Did you see Broadway shows early on?
I didn't see Broadway shows till probably 20 years ago.
Oh,
I could
really?
never afford it. I was in theater, Tom, and I was
Sure.
in
Yeah.
California on the West
Yeah.
Coast.
How about regional theaters?
Certainly, yes. I mean, after college, I moved to Seattle to start that MFA program.
Yeah, I was going to ask
And
you about your if you got a master's.
yeah,
Okay.
I never finished it. I didn't jibe with the faculty, but ACT in San Francisco had an intern program for third year grad students, and I got into that program after 1 year at ACT. And then I did that year and was hired there for the next couple of years to be the design assistant. And then I went down to San Diego to the Old Globe to be the assistant designer there. So I worked with amazing people there.
Those three theaters are among the most prestigious regional theaters in the country.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very respected theaters. And a lot of actors who performed there have gone on to be big stars.
It was a wonderful place. I mean, I was spoiled because I learned what it's like to have a tailor and a cobbler and
Oh,
these
yeah.
shops that can produce anything in the world. And then I stayed on at the Globe to design shows occasionally. I went back for years, but I ventured into the world of photo styling for quite a few years because
Interesting.
San Diego's such a great place.
Uh-huh.
But I still designed a few shows a year, but I
For
was
those who don't know, explain photo styling.
sure. They're different kinds, but naturally it was clothing for me. And it just means choosing the clothing that a model is going to wear in a photo shoot. This was mostly still photography. And making sure it looks right, whether it's steaming it out or clamping it in the back or whatever it takes to do that. And then I would also scout locations some, and I would find props and style them and do a lot of different things,
So
which
this is film and television, or are you talking
it
about
was really just still photography.
still? Okay, okay.
I've been
Sorry,
asked
you
to
did
do
say
some
that.
films, but I never have. A few commercials, but
Okay,
mostly still
okay, okay.
photography.
Well, in a way, think about it, still is more of a challenge because it's frozen and it can be studied, right?
Right, right. And it was wonderful. I ended up working in a commercial photography studio for, I don't know, 2.5 years or
Are
something. And
you the person that like makes sure that the sesame on the buns are all like perfectly set?
yes, I mean, food
Really?
styling is a whole art in itself, but I did do some of that. I had to make ice cream and, some other things like that. But just
Wow.
adjusting props and finding the right combination that would work with the clothes and hire the makeup artist and all of that.
So you must really love research.
I do. I mean, it went from being a pile of books at the library
Well, yeah.
to
How do you
now
do that, Claire?
it
How do
it was I don't know if it was better or worse. Now I have my own library. I'm surrounded in my studio here by books. Between that and Google Image and what I already
Oh,
know,
I can see that you got this very arty, blurred background.
I do. I do.
Is that purposeful? Is that your aesthetic?
Yes. This is my studio, and this I want to be my happy place. I
Yeah.
want everything in here to be happy and help to inspire me to do other things.
So you've got books in there, and you've got what else? It
Yep,
looks
I've
like a
got
big
lots of books,
room.
art supplies in these cabinets. I have
Mhm.
my two ukuleles. I have a good reading chair. I've got, well, right now it's covered with costume renderings from the last
Okay, so
30
it's not
years.
like a working space. You don't have any, I don't see any mannequins or gowns or anything.
No, but it's because I don't do the draping. I don't do that. I just draw them and
Yeah.
then show them to the draper in the costume shop
You
who
know, you
does.
probably saw the movies, and I'm trying to remember the titles of the designers and tells their biopics. I hope you saw them because they were so much fun for me to see. They depicted their lives when these, like when they were young men and they learned how to draw and their career after that. And, you know, the one, his mother encouraged him to continue on sketching and all that. It was so inspiring. I learned the process of design from one. Do you know the movies I'm talking about? There were two
I
or three.
do, and I, of course, can't think of the name of them either.
Versace was one of them, I think.
Uh-huh. I
Versace.
saw all of those, and that's fashion, that's not theatrical
Correct.
costumes.
Well, I'm
But
talking
it
about the
is,
sketching, I guess,
yeah,
right?
it is a similar process. There's so much reading and rereading of the plays, talking with the director multiple times, lots of research. The thing I like best is there's so many directors I've worked with so many times.
Mhm.
And we just have a conversation about it, and we have a working knowledge from years of doing it. And the best thing is when he or she will have an idea, and I'll say, "Ooh, cool." And
Yeah.
then I'll go back and say, "Look at this." And they'll say, "Ooh, cool." And it kind of keeps morphing
And
from,
isn't that what artists love, the collaboration part, bouncing ideas off of each other?
yes, it is great. But also, I'm looking forward to not doing that and just
Okay.
doing what I want.
So, so tell me, were there any like tyrants along the way, my way or the highway kind of people?
Tom, I can't tell you that. Um, there were one or two along the way.
Creative disagreements. Well,
Yes,
you,
yes.
you had
I
your
mean,
share.
I learned early on that you can't force your designs, even if you think it's the most fabulous thing in the world, it's not. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't work for the actor or for the play, you can't just think about what a fabulous design it is.
Yeah. Well, someone taught me the word precious. What does that mean? Precious means that, like, holding on to a bone like a dog. If you got this idea, you're damned and determined that you're going to get your way. But then there are people who say, "I'm not precious." People have ideas.
Yes,
I'll go with it.
yes.
I'm not. I'll choose my battles. In other
Yes,
words.
you
So,
have to choose them. And I learned that a long time ago. It's like a writer who's written something, but an editor says you need to take out this and this and this. Some
mhm.
writers get very precious about not wanting to lose any of their words. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing for design.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't work to fight about
Guilty as charged as a writer.
it.
I work with an editor, and she makes me look better. I'm a better writer because of her. So
Exactly.
there you have it. So I really understand that whole process. So let's talk about one of the reasons I wanted you on the show. I've seen every Yuletide since its beginning. I've been covering the arts for 50 years, but I've seen a huge amount of work, over the years. And when Yuletide came around, oh my gosh, it was from the get-go. But then, of course, the years when Ty Johnson, who you mentioned before, who's the executive producer of the Indianapolis Pops
Hmm.
and has been for how long have they been together, Jack and Ty?
Oh, a long while.
For 25 years, I gotta
Yes.
believe.
Yes. Yeah.
Didn't they create Yuletide?
I believe that it existed, but it was much smaller. They made it what it is today.
Well, every year I review it, it's just like trying to find a new way to describe it, but it always comes back. I always make sure that if you've never been to Broadway, folks, you don't think you're ever going to get there and you've never experienced, just go to Yuletide and you will
Mhm.
experience a Broadway quality musical presentation. Every aspect, it's as good as anything that they're doing in New York City and better in my mind. I mean, Yuletide now, I believe that people all over the country want to model it, want to copy it because of its artistic quality. And you're a part of that and that team. The last show that I went to, I loved whoever created the program because they inserted a lot of background about the hours spent, the personnel, all that was involved in the making of Yuletide. And I was astounded. I mean, I just presumed a lot of that had to been taking place. The art and craft that it takes and the people involved who make that happen. And you're an integral part of that. I'm just astounded at its quality, though, and I always am. And then, of course, the talent that they bring in.
Yes.
Sandy Patty, but over the years, the Calloway sisters and Ben Crawford, and
Yes.
on and on and on and on over the years, and the acts and the soloists, and oh my God. So the talent, the art and craft, and then, of course, the symphony itself. I mean, they just keep getting better and better and better,
Hmm.
if that's
Yes, they do.
possible, right?
Yep.
So I've been dying to talk to you, but I don't think people get this reference anymore, but for a long time I called it, I don't know if you read any of my reviews, but one of them I referred to as a night of a thousand gowns.
It feels like that. Yes.
Just like a feast for the eyes doesn't even come close to describing your costumes. I mean, oh God. So let's talk about Yuletide. And so have you started next year?
Oh, yes. I've already
How
bought
far
some
are you
things.
into it? How far are you into it?
Well, really, it starts while I'm still in Indianapolis after the show opens. I will have a casual chat with Ty and Brandy Rogers and Matthew Creek, who are all such an incredible team.
They are on the Yuletide staff or the pop staff.
They are on the Pops staff. They work in what's called the Pops Palace,
Okay.
and they make everything happen.
Okay.
So, what I need to do is to credit Ty Johnson because I came from a world of Shakespeare and some musicals and straight plays into this. And he kept pushing me, which I resisted, of course, at the beginning, until he really trusted me. But he really pushed me to up the ante and not just make it more sparkly, but just make it more fabulous.
Why
And
did you resist?
because I was used to working with a director, not a producer for
Uh,
those things. And he is so knowledgeable in every phase of this. He's very hands-on. I wasn't used to getting gowns approved by a producer, but and nowadays we talk about things and it's just like friends talking. It's just fun. I've been doing it for so long, and he trusts me, and it's a lot easier. But at first, it was a little tricky to know that I had to get his approval. But that's all in the past now. And it's a wonderful team. Jen Ladner, Greg Sanders, of course, Maestro Jack Everly, Aaron Fuchsa, who's been a performer and is now on the writing team.
his scripts are amazing.
Yeah, he's wonderful. And Stuart Duke, Matt Hansen, who used to do the sound. We've just worked together for so much now, and we have a language. So
A
I
well-oiled machine, would you agree?
I would agree. Yes. And yes. And I do work on it all year round. I've already ordered a sample gown from a company that I've worked with a lot, and I can say, I like this, but can you do it in red? Can you lower the neckline? I'd like these sleeves so they can build what I want.
Wow. Tell me, when was the decision made to have the volume of costumes, the costume changes? Has that just grown over the years? And of course, the budget. You have a budget. You could
I
do
do. I have a not enough budget for a show this size, but we have a huge
really.
warehouse. Yeah,
I I
yeah.
look at what you got on that stage. I thought, oh my God, these guys. I mean, like they just must be dripping with money.
No, nobody is dripping with money. I am very good at getting a lot of bang for my buck, and
Okay.
we have a huge warehouse,
You
Tom.
costume designers always are, though. Oh my God. I've been in that warehouse. I did a story on it. I can't remember, but it was like I was telling people this is like King Tut's tomb
Yeah, yeah.
for
It's
costume people.
yes, it's pretty amazing, and that's menswear from
And it's
tuxes,
this Yuletide stuff.
It's also Yuletide things, yes. Sets of men's sparkly jackets and dance costumes and shoes and everything. Now we can,
Accessories, jewelry, I
yes,
mean, props. I mean,
yes,
it's
yep,
mind-blowing.
yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So we do use those and some over and
The
over again.
reuse stuff, okay, right?
Yes. And
Okay.
then things just look old. There's a different design sensibility and, the purple was never right, or those gowns are purple and gold, or those look so 80s. And so we do.
It's mind-boggling to me how just the mechanics, how many people assist you in costuming?
I
Because,
have two assistants for myself, two design assistants.
okay.
And then there is a costume shop of the union wardrobe crew that runs the shop. They also do all the alterations, all the fittings and
I was going to
alterations.
ask you about that. What a
Yes.
chess game that must be to get all that talent, herd them up, and get appointments for fittings and all that. When does
Yep.
that start?
Well, we're having a fitting in May. We've
Mhm.
started having fittings earlier in August, and then we have some in September.
That's
And
critical, isn't it? The fittings are critical.
oh my goodness,
Never
yes,
too soon, right?
yes, because we don't get anybody from out of town until right before rehearsals start. So
Oh,
we fit
God.
all the wonderful local cast. And I also have to give a shout out to Stacy O'Leary, who is the union wardrobe supervisor who has been with me all these years. And I absolutely could not do this with her.
Is that location in-house or somewhere else?
They are an Indianapolis union wardrobe crew, and they work at Clues and
Yeah, but do they have a location off
yes,
site from,
we,
okay.
no, well, we have the warehouse, but we now have a costume shop in the lower part of the Symphony where thankfully now we can keep it set up so it's a full
Well, I didn't
functioning.
know that. So
Yeah.
okay, oh,
That's
cool.
fairly recent. It helps because prior to that, they had to load everything from the warehouse back to the theater. And it's just a huge waste of time. And
Sure.
thanks to largely Brandy Rogers, we got this costume shop fully functioning so they can use it all year round. Since I'm not there all year round, they can use it for other pot
I had
shows.
no idea they had a concert shop underneath. Wow.
Yep. Yep.
That's cool. Okay, so the fittings, that's one thing. So when do you have your plot ready?
That's a
Explain,
good question.
explain that, what I mean by that to our listeners. I kind of try to make these shows educational about the craft of theater.
Sure. A costume plot is basically some kind of a list or a spreadsheet telling what each performer is wearing for each number. There is also a dressing list, which has each costume item from tights to socks to shoes to t-shirts to what jewelry they're wearing. It's very detailed, and my assistants do a visual costume plot so each performer is reminded. We take photos in their fittings and then they're reminded, oh yes, I wear that for Silent Night, oh yes, I wear that for 'Twas the Night Before Christmas or whatever. So that plot takes a long time to get together. I have an idea in my head now. I might have found a fabulous new gown for the opening of the show this year. Because it's my last year, we're going to do some kind of cool things. And I think I know what I want to wear to the finale. Of course, we know what people will wear for Santa Tap,
Yeah.
but everything else is up in the air until I would say I usually have a pretty good idea in the summer.
How about the so-called palette?
I think it starts with the opening number.
And explain again what a color palette, what I'm talking about.
Sure, each number. And within that number, each segment of a number has colors that work well together. And I have to think through what everybody is wearing for every number and every song in a number if it's a medley. And sometimes there's an overall color scheme. Well, there's always an idea behind it, but it can change from number to number sometimes too. But I have to think, oh, we have two people in blue. So I will tell Jen Ladner, the director and choreographer, there will be two people in blue, like Mary and Emily are in blue. John and Mike are in green, or, whatever it is, so they can stage things accordingly. So it's a pleasing stage picture.
How do you make the decision, though? Okay, let me see. How do I put this? The show it's lavish, and that's intentional. People want to see glamour, right? What else do you want to give them? What is part of your vision as a designer? What is your aesthetic there? What are you going for?
Well, I would like to think that we err on the side of elegance, and it's pretty sparkly, and it's gotten
Oh,
more and
yeah,
more
a lot
sparkly.
of bling.
Yeah, a lot of bling, but I think there are numbers that call for more of that than others. A
Yeah,
lot also depends on the host or hostess.
yeah,
If when we had Angela Brown, she was more of an operatic person. So the shows will be geared toward the host or hostess. If
interesting.
they're more Broadway or more like Sandy Patty is, it really just depends on the host or
And like, what's his name from Las Vegas?
Frankie Moreno.
Frankie. Yeah,
Yes.
what were you going for there?
Well, he's clearly very handsome and very Vegas, but he also needed to be Yuletide. I mean, I fit him in full formal tails for the first time ever. He'd never
Mm.
worn that, and he thought, wow, I look good. And a lot of men don't realize how handsome those are and why those
Yeah,
have been a classic style for so
sure.
long.
Sure. And then of course, I remember one of my favorites of your work was the White Christmas, Irving Berlin.
Yes.
The shoes, I remember those shoes. They show up, they still show up once in a while.
Yeah, they're great shoes. And we
The
did that
red
last year
suits and
with
yeah.
Sandy Patty. I had never done red tails before, and I'd certainly never done red and white shoes, but that's the classic opening for it. And there's some things that audiences expect to see, like the classic white Christmas gowns at the end when Sandy comes out in that and the ensemble has that on
Well,
also.
there's those gowns, the way they move, they float. These
Mhm.
people float onto the
Mhm.
stage with these.
Yes. Well, the engineering of gowns has come a long way. It's just blows my mind. There's some gowns I get. The Polar Express gowns are an example of this. They're very big. They're actually pretty heavy, but the
Well, that's what
structure,
I wondered about the weight of these
yeah,
things.
they're heavy. The wardrobe women start working out with weights and lifting a
So,
lot of
so
things.
they're all built here. They're not from China or something like that.
They're from all over. I can't say they're from here, but I have now established a lot of places that I can go look at
So
gowns.
you have incredible resources, don't you?
I do. I
Oh,
do.
wow.
This head is full of a lot of ridiculous knowledge about sourcing for gowns and jewels and jewelry and fantastic menswear, which has come
Well,
along.
experience counts for a lot, doesn't it?
It
And
does.
And
Yes.
you spent a career adding to your repertoire of resources, right?
Hmm.
And you're continually learning. That's what I love about the theater, well, other professions as well. You're continually learning, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that. I will also say, it is important for me, for us to follow some trends and make some things new and maybe a little bit younger sometimes.
Mhm.
All theaters, my husband is the president and CEO of the Arvada Center outside of Denver, and theaters are always looking for new audiences, and we need to attract younger people.
Of
So
course.
last year we did, some more pop numbers that were a little bit more contemporary, and I like to do that with the wardrobe also. Menswear has come so far and is so much fun now.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the Sandy Patty, the novelty number, comedy thing. Remind me, what was that?
That was called Shopper's Lament.
Yes, yeah. And it wasn't a nod to technology.
It talked about shopping online and how when that number debuted, it was before my time, but I've done it two or three times, and it was all about a lot of women with shopping bags. And
Yeah,
most of us
yeah,
don't shop that much
right.
anymore. So there was a little joke with one of them, either Susie or Sandy, holding up a little tiny shopping bag and talking about online things. But, that number was the hardest one to do because
Mm,
it had to be so outrageous. And it was really fun to do something like
mm.
that, that is more like the rest of the theater shows that I do other times during
Yeah.
the.
Well, what are some of your favorite memories of Yuletide? I mean, I'm sure that's a hard question to answer when people ask you what's your favorite book. It's like, oh God, or
That
play or
is
musical. But so for
that
you,
is hard.
is it a blur? I mean, but
Much
what's
of it is a blur, but also I loved Polar Express when we first did that number. And I had gotten these kind of sparkly men's navy blue suits for that and these beautiful big gowns. Sandy Patty has had some wonderful moments, even small ones like last year. I think it was Silent Night, and
Mhm.
I loved the gown she wore. I loved Ben Crawford's year. So many have had different things. There's not one that I really love. I redesigned the elf costumes about, I don't know, 12 years ago, maybe. That was really fun when those debuted.
What sticks in my mind was the talk about lavish, the costumes for the Three Kings thing, the number. Oh my gosh, they blew
Yeah,
me away.
those are pretty extraordinary costumes. Yes.
Yeah, talk about those. How did that come out of your head?
I had some help with that.
Hmm.
I had some help, and they were all to be these jewel tones and just this mashup of gold and jewel tones, just all these, and lush fabrics and all of that, that kind of represented the Middle East and the four corners of the world in a way, and just to be as
They
lavish
were
as possible.
magnificent, Claire. They
But I
were,
did not do that
they
on
were,
my own. I want to be very clear.
well, nevertheless, the Yuletide, in my mind, they're pieces of art, as a whole. It's
That's great.
art, you
Yep.
know?
It's fun. I mean, there's that beautiful set that has been around forever
Yeah.
that's sort of lavender blue, and that doesn't change from year to year. So there's
Mhm.
really no more set. It's really the costumes become the set. And
Yeah, I don't know for a fact that, well, actually, I have talked to people at the ISO who indicated that there are orchestras who are trying to copy what Yuletide does now because they see, number one, the financial benefits, but artistically, what the possibilities are in their own communities. And then there are, people are always looking for cash cows.
yeah,
Everybody in town has a Christmas tradition now.
you have
Museums
to.
have
Yep.
now. And
Theaters too,
there's so
everybody.
much competition during the
Yep.
month of December, but Yuletide is the premier. And, so I have to think that there are people who come and study it. I mean, have you been approached by people, costume designers who in their own communities who are trying to pull off what you do?
No one has ever approached me about that. I
Interesting.
know I am aware there are other ones around the country. In the early days, the first couple of years I did Yuletide, we packed up last year's show and sent it to Baltimore, so they did it. They still do a version of Santa Tap. Jen Ladner goes out there every year to stage that for them or to set that. But
Yeah.
I have never seen ones around the country, and no one has ever approached me about it, but I am aware they exist.
But you're not associated with any of those. No, there's a separate company that produces packages, of musicals like Hairspray and others. I think Jack and Ty have some sort of an organization, right? You're
Yes,
not involved with any of those
I
shows.
am. Actually, I have been. It's called the Symphonic Pops Consortium.
There you go. There you go.
And they used to go out on the road a lot more. Somebody would buy the package. When we
Gotcha.
produced Hairspray, which was a blast with John Waters, we did it in Indianapolis and then we went to Baltimore. And he was involved in that there as well.
Yuletide performers went along, a lot of those people, right? And then
Some
they
of them did, yes. And
hired
then
locals.
some were
Yeah.
hired locally. And we did a Irving Berlin show at
Yeah.
Carnegie Hall, which was amazing. And
Some of the local talent that come to mind that you've enjoyed working with, let's give some of them a shout out. Joseph Perkins is a friend of mine.
Joseph Perkins, Amy Owens, Mandy McCarthy. There's so many.
And it's as an observer, I've noticed there's kind of a culture that's built up around Yuletide because I see it reflected in Facebook posts from all the performers and the people
Mhm.
I know. They get bonded. And
They
that
do.
happens in the theater, but Yuletide has a special culture. Do you
They
agree?
do. I mean, I definitely agree. Everyone is away from their homes for Thanksgiving. I leave after opening. I'm done. But
Hmm.
we do produce a Broadway style and level of show in like 2.5 weeks. So it's so very intense until opening. And then they get to relax and have more fun. And they do bond. They do Secret Santas. They decorate their dressing rooms and all of that. This year, I want to come back at least once to see it because it's my last year. But I never get to be a part of the fun stuff. I'm just in all the intense parts of it at the beginning. It is fun too. It is often fun too, but
And how would you describe the magic, another part of this culture? And she did it, what was it her sixth time or seventh time, Sandy Patty, speaking of Miss Patty.
yes,
What made, for me, I have, I've written about her, I've interviewed her. She was on this podcast, by the way. Oh gosh, it was so much fun talking to her. She's so authentic and genuine, and
she is.
she just makes you feel good, right?
She is. She's a wonderful human being. Yes.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
joy to work with her. I think it's just at the beginning, so many of us work for so many months on this show. That's in isolation. And then we start having fittings and we'll start having dance rehearsals and things like that. But until you're in the rehearsal hall and see the caliber of performers, it's like, okay, let's go. And then the host or hostess walks in and they elevate all of it.
They set the tone.
They do set the tone. Yes, they set the tone absolutely. And then the lights. Stuart Duke has done the lights for every single Yuletide. And you start listening to the music, the singers and the musicians. Greg does such a great job with the ensemble and everybody as music director. And it all just amps up. And everything that you've done is just escalated 20 times by the caliber of performances and all these other elements.
So I would think when you talk about that intensity, you've got that level of talent and they all have to undergo the pressure. They've got to measure up because
Mhm.
they're surrounded by so much.
There's no room for error. None of us can screw up. Nobody can. It's
Yeah.
too intense. And so you have to be really conscious of who you're casting and who you're surrounding yourself with.
Try as I may as a critic, every year I try to find something that I can write about. I never consciously, that's not part of what I'm about. But, my job is to be an arbiter,
Sure.
But I could tell you one thing, though. People ask me, so what do you look for? And I say, well, I'll tell you what, it's simple. If I'm distracted by the wrong shoes or a bad wig or a lighting issue or sound or whatever, it takes me out of the story, then I need to comment about it because I come out of TV and the whole art form around that is it needs to look seamless, like it's effortless.
Hmm.
But it just
It
happened.
does. It does. And Yuletide is about the costumes visually, but in most shows I do, if somebody notices my work, then something's wrong. It can't be about me. It can't be about the costumes. There are
Correct.
exceptions, of course. And
Yeah.
my very favorite kind of stylized things to do that are a mashup of period and very contemporary things.
But
But
for me, the costumes don't take me out of the story. They enhance it for me.
it's great.
I appreciate it as art, as I said. So, how are you going to fill that void of not coming into town to do Yuletide?
It will be a void. I mean, for years, I got
You
to
did
see
it
my
remotely
parents.
too, so it's not as even though you weren't in town, you were still focused on it.
Right. Yep. Yep. I've never lived in town when I did it, although I'm there for a month and then a couple of other times during the production period. When I first started doing it, my parents were alive and several siblings lived there. So it was a time to see all of them. And
Right.
that was wonderful as well as do the show.
You'll
It
miss that, right?
I will miss that. We'll still get together. Ellen is the only sibling that's there now. Other relatives in Bloomington and things like that. We'll still get together. And this will be a void. I can't pretend like it's not. It will be bittersweet
Do
this
you,
year.
I know that for some artists it's harder than others, but do you grieve after a show when a show is over? You have to let go of this thing that you've created together. And when you leave people, you promise you're gonna have lunch or dinner. You do that for a while, and then everyone goes their separate ways. I couldn't do it. I have a hard time with that.
It will be difficult, especially this team, the core team that I've worked with for so many years. We've become close. We text about grandchildren or other shows we're doing, or, how are you doing? We check in on during the years, different times. That will be the most difficult thing, I think. It has been very rewarding when my stepdaughter has been in the show. Unbelievable. That has been very special. And, for South Pacific last year, my husband and my daughter were both in that, our daughter.
I love that show.
So that was really special. And I will miss doing those little pop shows. I can't pretend like I'm not going to miss all of that.
Do you do the costume design for all of the talent that come in for the Pops concerts? I wondered about, or do the females, do they bring their own clothes?
Yes and no. Sometimes I do them and sometimes I don't. Sometimes
Okay.
they bring their own.
I was just curious. You have a very distinctive design, so I always try to figure. I wonder if that's a Clare Henkel.
That's
Whatever.
what a nice thing to say.
Of course, I have an agenda having you on the show. I'm trying to widen my audience, and I was talking to someone I went to college with who was a costume designer. I told her about you, and she was, "Oh my gosh, I'm excited to hear that show." I said, "Good." Because I want people around the country who I'm developing a great audience, including people all over the country. My intention is that good work is made everywhere,
Hmm.
every city. It's not just New York. It's not
Yes.
Chicago. It's not just LA. It's not all the big markets. Good work is happening in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I get to shine a spotlight on the talent. And of course, there's a reason why a lot of big names come through here because of Jack, the Palladium, the two cabarets. We've got Clues is refurbishing.
Yep.
And really, we have an entertainment hub here, and I don't think that people realize that.
It,
Indy is becoming hot.
it is extraordinary. And what Ty and Jack have built for Yuletide and all of the pops department, I'm sure the classical as well, although I can't speak
Yes, of
to that.
course.
I
Of
don't
course.
work with them, but what they have built is extraordinary and I would think unsurpassed anywhere else. in the contract.
As objective as I can be, but I've seen some of the best orchestras in the world, and we're climbing up there. It's not going to be long. I interviewed June Marco recently, and oh my gosh, the potential there that he wants to tour them and record them and all that. He's got great big idea. Hey, I gave you that whole thing about wanting to widen my audience, and I certainly wanted you on too because I wanted you to not only inform and educate the audience about what goes on behind the scenes, but the culture that we talked about, the performers, that what they project. Do you have a message for those people? The fact that, I asked you if you were going to agree. What do you say to all of those people that you work with in front of and behind the curtain? What's your message to them as you part?
That's a very good question, and I haven't really considered that. I mean, they will be in good hands when I am not there. Yuletide will continue to look as wonderful and magical as it has looked all of these years. The performers will be able to move as easily as they have and will be well taken care of. The fit of menswear has become very important to me. Not everybody cares about that, but it's important to me, as well as all of the sparkly gowns and all of that. My goal is to make people look and feel as good as they possibly can for the role they are doing in whatever show they're in.
Are you mindful of when you design that these people also have to work in these gowns? They dance, they move.
Oh, yes. It's not always easy. Some of these have been a little heavy. There have been times when I have fit everybody in something and it's been fine, and then they got on stage and it's like, I can't really move in this very well. That's pretty rare. I mean, this, as I said to Ty recently, this is not my first rodeo. It's actually my last rodeo. So yes, things do happen, but if they can't move, the bottom line is they're the ones that have to go out there and perform. And if they don't feel like they look good or feel good, then I haven't done my job.
Sherry Hong, I interviewed her on this show. She said some really nice things about you and your design, and she talked about how she felt in that dress you created for her violin solo, and oh God, it was remarkable. I mean, she looked like a movie star. Yeah.
She has been really fun, so much fun to costume.
What a delight to finally meet you. I would love to see you backstage when you come so that I can meet you in person and shake your hand and tell you how much I'm an admirer of your work. And it's fun to gush about you to your face.
That's very kind of you. And I look forward to meeting you backstage also.
Okay, well, I hope to see you in December. Can't wait to see what you're cooking up now. I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. So until then, great visiting with you.
Thank you, Tom. I enjoyed this very much.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.